Good afternoon. Welcome to the Analyst. Today we'll be taking up 7 newspaper articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express and discussing them. The handout for the same will be available in the description of this video for your kind perusal. Please have a look at that. The first article that we'll take up today is related to criminal justice system in India, as a write-up has appeared in the Indian Express regarding the same. The second article is related to the India-UK relations, as the External Affairs Minister Mr. Jaishankar met with the Prime Minister of UK. Additionally, we'll take up 5 articles in the simplified which will be useful for your prelims and mains preparation. Now, the first article is related to the criminal justice system in India. The context behind it is a write-up that appeared in the Indian Express. It highlights 2 incidents. One related to the rape of a woman at a bus depot in Pune, and another the murder of a sarpanch in the Beed district in Maharashtra. Both incidents highlight the lacunas in the criminal justice system in India. Therefore, we'll discuss the issues plaguing the criminal justice system in India and the recommendations for reforming the same. Additionally, we'll focus on the police reforms in India and recommendations for the same. This is important in GS2 under the topic governance. Now first, what is the criminal justice system? What does it comprise of? The objective of the criminal justice system is to ensure justice, not only for the victim, but for the society as a whole, to ensure that the perpetrators, the accused, the convicted persons do not go unpunished. Now, the criminal justice system in India rests upon 3 pillars mainly. 1, the police. 2nd, the judicial system, the criminal trial process. And 3rd, the correctional system, that is the prisons in India. We'll focus first upon the judicial process. First, we will try to understand the criminal trial process in India, because then only we'll be able to understand the recommendations of the committees like Malimat Committee or Madhav Menon Committee regarding the reforms in the criminal justice system in India. And for understanding the criminal trial process, let's first understand a few basics. The criminal justice system in India is administered through the criminal laws. The laws, they can be categorized under 2 headers broadly. They can be substantive in character or they can be procedural in character. The substantive laws are those laws which prescribe the rights, duties, liabilities of the parties involved in the case. They define the offences and they prescribe the punishments for those offences. For example, the Indian Penal Code, it's a substantive law. Now it is known as the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. Likewise, the procedural laws, they describe the procedures which have to be followed when the trial happens in the court. For example, the Criminal Procedure Code. Now it is known as the Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita. Likewise, the offences are categorized under the laws. The offences can be classified as cognizable offence and non-cognizable offence. The cognizable offences are those offences in which the arrest can be made by the police without getting a warrant from the magistrate. The cognizable offences, they are serious in nature and the police can make an arrest. It can arrest the accused without securing a warrant from the magistrate. They are defined under section 2C of the CRPC. The provisions of CRPC that I quote, you can choose not to remember the sections of the CRPC unless you have law optional or public administration optional. Likewise, the non-cognizable offences, they are defined under section 2L of the CRPC. The offences can also be categorized as compoundable offences and non-compoundable offences. The compoundable offences are those offences where a settlement can be arrived upon between the parties outside the court. The parties can mutually settle the dispute outside the court. They are usually less serious in nature. For example, theft, simple assault, they can be settled outside the court as per section 320 of CRPC. The non-compoundable offences are those which are grave, which are serious in nature, where a settlement cannot be arrived upon outside the court. For example, the offences like murder, theft, etc. Likewise, the offences can also be categorized as bailable offences and non-bailable offences. The bailable offences are those offences in which bail can be secured by the accused as a matter of right. The person, if arrested for a bailable offence, there he has a right to get bail under section 436 of CRPC. Whereas in the non-bailable offences, usually the bail can be secured only after applying for bail in the Sessions Court or the lower court through sections 437 or 439 of the CRPC. Additionally, if a person fears that he may be arrested, although he has not committed that crime, there is an apprehension of arrest by the person, then he can seek anticipatory bail also. The anticipatory bail provisions, they are mentioned under section 438 of CRPC. Now, whenever the police receives the information regarding the commission of a cognizable offence, that is a serious offence under section 2 subclause C of the CRPC, the police registers an FIR under section 154 of the CRPC. The FIR registration happens under section 154. Earlier, the provision was that the police has to register an FIR immediately upon receiving an information regarding the commission of a cognizable offence. But now, under the Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita, under section 173 subclause 3, the leeway is given to the investigating officer. The investigating officer can take a time of up to 14 days to conduct a preliminary inquiry in the case. If the officer is satisfied that there is a prima facie case made out, then he can register an FIR within a period of 14 days. Now, after the registration of an FIR, the investigation is done by the police under section 156 of CRPC. In the investigation, the police officer tries to determine the facts, tries to determine the circumstances of the case. Based upon that, he can arrest the person also. If a person is arrested, the person can apply for bail. Even before arrest also, a person can apply for anticipatory bail under section 438 of CRPC. Likewise, if the person is accused in a case and FIR is filed, he can also approach the High Court directly for quashing of the FIR itself. There is an inherent power of the High Court under section 482 of the CRPC, whereby it can issue any order and the person can approach, the accused can approach the High Court directly for the quashing of the FIR itself. Now, when the police officer is investigating that case, during investigation he can search any premises, he can make any seizures under section 165 or 166 of CRPC. He can take any measures for the discovery of any incriminating material to determine any evidences. He can interrogate the accused and he can record the statements of the accused and witnesses. Now, upon the completion of the investigation from the side of the police officer, if he is of the opinion that there is no case which is made out here, then the police simply submits the closure report to the magistrate in the case and the case is closed and the person is no longer an accused. Whereas upon the investigation of the case, if the police is convinced that there is a case which is made out, then the police has to file a charge sheet. The charge sheet is filed after the completion of the investigation under section 173 of CRPC. Now, when the charge sheet is filed, at that time itself, the arguments take place. The arguments by both the prosecution and the defense regarding the charges which are framed in the court. If regarding the charges framed, if the court is satisfied that the charges are not made out against the accused, then the accused is released before the trial itself. The trial does not take place if the court believes that the charge sheet filed by the police is not true. But if the court is satisfied that the charges are made out and the charges should be framed, then the accused has a matter of right to file a review petition against the charges framed also. The accused can file a case, a review petition against the charges framed by the lower court in the Sessions Court or in the High Court. And he can also apply for a discharge application in the same court also. If that is not accepted, then the trial takes place. If at any stage during trial or during investigation, if a person apprehends that he may be arrested for a crime that he has not committed, then he can seek anticipatory bail. He can file an anticipatory bail application. It can be filed in the Sessions Court. If the Sessions Court refuses the anticipatory bail, then the person can approach the High Court also. If the High Court also rejects the anticipatory bail application, then the accused can approach the Supreme Court also using the route of special leave petition under Article 136 of the Constitution. If the police wants to arrest a person during investigation, it can first issue a notice to that person, a notice of appearance under Section 41A of CRPC, or it can make the arrest directly also under Section 41 of the CRPC. If a person has been arrested, he can be kept in the police custody for 24 hours maximum, within which he has to be produced in front of a magistrate. This is a fundamental right under Article 22, that within 24 hours a person arrested has to be produced in front of a magistrate. The magistrate can then sanction further custody, either police custody or judicial custody. If the magistrate feels that the investigation is not yet complete, the police needs more time for interrogation, then he can sanction further police custody. Usually under the IPC it was allowed for a maximum period of 14 days. And after that the person is sent to the judicial custody, that is in the prison, that is in the jail. While he is under trial, the accused may be kept under the judicial custody. While the person is in custody, again he can file an application for regular bail also. This application can be made in the Sessions Court if it has been rejected by the magistrate, and if the Sessions Court also rejects the bail application, the person can approach the High Court also again. And if the High Court also rejects the bail application, then the bail application can be filed in the Supreme Court as well. Now that was the process if the police has registered an FIR upon receiving the information regarding the commission of a cognizable offence. What if the police refuses from registering the FIR itself even after receiving the information regarding the commission of a cognizable offence? In that case, a private complaint can be filed. A private criminal complaint can be filed against the offender directly to the magistrate. You can approach the magistrate directly. The magistrate can take cognizance of the offence. Under Section 190 of CRPC, he can take cognizance of the offence, he can acknowledge the commission of the offence. He can either conduct a preliminary inquiry himself, or the magistrate can direct the police to register the FIR using Section 156 Clause 3 of CRPC. Now after that the accused may be arrested, the bail may be granted by the court, or he may be rendered to judicial custody or police custody depending upon the gravity of the offence, and the trial happens. Now once the FIR has been registered by the police, the investigation is done by the police. The investigation involves the collection of evidence, the interrogation of the accused, but the statements given by the accused, they cannot be used against himself as evidence during trial. Because if the police extracts a confession out of the accused, that confession may have been extracted under force, under coercion. Therefore, under Section 2627 of the Indian Evidence Act also, the confession made in front of the police officer is not admissible in a criminal trial. The confession can only be made by the accused in front of a magistrate. During the investigation, the police also records the statements of witnesses. It collects the scientific evidence, does the scientific analysis, etc. And then once the charges are framed in the court, the trial starts. During the trial, the evidence is presented first by the prosecution, that is from the state, and depending upon that, the onus of proof is determined. The onus of proof usually is upon the prosecution in India, because we follow the adversarial system. The criminal justice system in India is adversarial in nature. That is, the burden of proof lies upon the prosecution. The accused is presumed to be innocent until proven guilty. But in certain cases, the burden of proof lies on the accused. For example, the terrorism-related cases. The person accused of terrorism-related activities has to prove that he is innocent. And once the evidences are presented, the witnesses are called in the court. The witnesses are examined by the counsels from both sides, the public prosecutor and the defense counsel. The witnesses are cross-examined by the opposition counsel, and depending upon the evidence, the oral arguments are also made in the court, and finally the memorandums of arguments are submitted, if any. Then the court determines whether the person is guilty or not guilty. If the court finds that the person has not committed that offense depending upon the evidences presented during the trial, the court acquits the person. And if Depending upon the evidence, there is no doubt that the person is guilty and he has committed that offense, the person is convicted, and there is a quantum of sentence that is further imposed upon that person. Now, what are the reforms that are needed in the criminal justice system in India? The government has formed various committees to recommend reforms in the same. The most notable is the Malimat Committee. The Malimat Committee recommended comprehensive reforms in the criminal justice system in India. For reforms in the police, it recommended that we can separate the investigation wing from the law and order wing. That is, the police officers involved in the investigation of criminal cases, they should be under a separate wing, that is investigation wing, and the police officers involved in the law and order duties, they should be under a separate wing, the law and order wing. The committee recommended the constitution of National Security Commission and State Security Commissions for each state. We can form specialized squads for tackling the organized crimes in India. Likewise, the committee recommended the constitution of a Police Establishment Board. The Police Establishment Board will recommend the transfers and postings of the police officers. Police is a state subject. It is often alleged that the state governments, they interfere in the functioning of the police. They transfer the police officers often who are involved in the investigation of some high-profile cases. The constitution of the Police Establishment Board will reduce the political interference from the side of the states. We can adopt an inquisitorial system of investigation. That is, the judicial magistrates, they should play a proactive role. They can question the accused, the witnesses also. They should be able to summon those people also who are not witnesses in that case. Such a system is adopted in countries like Germany, France, etc. The committee recommended that we can amend the Article 20 subclause 3. The Article 20 subclause 3 of the Constitution gives the right to any person not to give a statement against himself. There is a right not to self-incriminate. You can't force a person to give a statement against himself, and the person has the right to remain silent. But the committee recommended that we can amend this. And in the Indian criminal justice system, there is a presumption of innocence. That is, the accused is presumed to be innocent until proven guilty. But the committee recommended that those facts which are proved in the court based upon the evidences presented, they should be considered as proved, and based upon that also the accused can be termed as guilty if the court has come to the conclusion after evaluating the evidences presented in that case. The committee recommended that there should be certain rights of the victims also. The victims should be able to participate in the trial of serious cases. The victims should be able to get the state-funded legal representation. If they cannot afford representation on their own, then the state should fund their legal representation, and the state should constitute a compensation fund, the victim compensation fund. Additionally, for judicial reforms, the committee recommended that we should increase the number of judges per million population in India. In advanced economies, the number of judges is 50 per million, whereas in India it is 20 odd judges per million population. Likewise, we can separate the criminal proceedings. That is, the criminal proceedings, they should be conducted in separate courts and civil proceedings in separate courts. And the National Judicial Commission should be formed so that the judicial appointments are done on time. Likewise, India can explore putting in place a witness protection law, which is already there, just like USA. And there should be a periodic review of the criminal justice system and the criminal laws in India so that they do not become outdated. Additionally, through the Madhav Menon Committee, more recommendations were given. The Madhav Menon Committee was formed to formulate a draft national policy on criminal justice. The committee recommended that the government can reclassify the offences. The offences can be reclassified under 4 broad headers, that is the social welfare offences. The social welfare offences, if they are committed, then the focus should not be upon the punishment for that offence. Focus should be upon the reparation, that is compensation to the victim, restitution of rights whose rights have been violated. The offences can be correctional offences. The correctional offences can be those offences for which the punishment is up to 3 years imprisonment. Then there can be the grave offences. For that we can have a separate code. The grave offences code can prescribe punishment for more than 3 years imprisonment. and there can be a separate economic offenses where the national economy is affected. But there are still certain issues which plague the criminal justice system in India. For example, it is pretty complex. The procedures prescribed under the Criminal Procedure Code, now it is known as Bharatiya Nagrik Suraksha Sanhita, and the Indian Evidence Act, they are pretty complex, and the lawyers, they use them to their advantage. They are still the colonial era relics. We need to update the IPC and CRPC further. There is the issue of delayed justice because there is a long pendency of cases in the judiciary in India. The under trials, they account for 2/3 of the people lodged in the prison in India. And there is a lack of accountability often from the side of police and the handling of the high profile cases where there are allegations of interference and justice not being done. Now let's focus specifically on the police reforms also. To take up police reforms, various committees and commissions have been formed by the government. For example, the National Police Commission gave its reports from 1977 to 1981, Riviera Committee in 1998, Padma Bhaiya Committee in 2000, Malimat Committee which we have already discussed, Police Act Drafting Committee in 2005, Supreme Court directions in the Prakash Singh versus Union of India case in 2006. The National Police Commission recommended that there should be a training process for the constables. There should be the establishment of the State Security Commission for each state, and there should be an assured minimum tenure for the Chief of Police for each state to ensure that he is able to follow through the cases that he has taken up. And the internal management of the police, it should be handled by the Chief of Police. The internal management should not be within the domain of the state government, rather the handling should be exclusively in the hands of the Chief of Police of that state. The Ribeiro Commission recommended the establishment of a police establishment board, again for the transfers, promotions of the police officers and the punishment prescription also. It recommended the establishment of a police recruitment board also, to ensure that the non-gazetted police officers, they are recruited through the police recruitment board only. The Padma Bhaiya Committee recommended that there should be a police training advisory council. There should be the appointment of an additional superintendents of police for crime and investigation in each district. Likewise, there should be the establishment of a district police complaints authority. The Police Act Drafting Committee recommended that all the police officers should have minimum 2 years of tenure, and the station house officer in charge should not be below the rank of the sub-inspector level, and the transfers, they should not be done through whims and fancies, they should be prohibited except as per the law. Additionally, in the Prakash Singh versus Union of India case, the Supreme Court gave specific guidelines for police reforms. It recommended the constitution of a State Security Commission. It is required for ensuring no interference from the side of the state government so that police is able to function freely. And the commission will also evaluate the performance of the police officers in the state and recommend the broad policy guidelines for the reforming the police system. The Director General of Police in the state should have a minimum of 2 years tenure. The appointment of the DGP should also be based upon the merit-based criteria. The police officers on operational duty, including the superintendent of police, the station house officers, etc., they should also have minimum of 2 years tenure. The Prakash Singh case guidelines also recommended the separation of the prosecution, investigation, law and order and other functions of the police. The recommendation included the establishment of a police establishment board which will recommend the transfers of the police officers below the DSP rank and the postings and promotions. There should be the establishment of a police complaints authority and the establishment of a National Security Commission also to select the chiefs of the central police organizations whose tenure will also be minimum of 2 years as per the Supreme Court guidelines in the Prakash Singh case. But still there are certain issues which plague the police also in India. For example, they still function upon the colonial legacy and the protection of the rights is not one of the priorities as it is often alleged. The accountability is also often questioned and there is a debate whether they should be accountable or more freedom should be given to them for ensuring operational discretion so that they are able to solve the criminal cases. The public perception is against the police. It is viewed as a tool of oppression in the hands of the state. and it is often alleged that it resorts to custodial torture, even death also. The number of police officers in India is also very less. We have about 192 police officers in India per lakh of our population. The working conditions of the constables remains pretty poor, and they are overworked, overburdened as per the recommendations of Padmanabhiya committee also. There are infrastructural constraints also in the functioning of the police. For example, they do not have access to sufficient number of police vehicles. The weapons and sometimes even the funds are also squeezed. There are the new crimes which are happening every day. For example, the cyber crimes, the new modes of insurgency which the police has to deal with, and it has to evolve likewise. The CBI is also alleged to be often a caged parrot in the hands of the political masters. The Model Police Act 2006 has not been updated. It has not incorporated the guidelines of the Prakash Singh versus Union of India case. 18 states have come up with their own police acts, but still the center has not adopted the Prakash Singh versus Union of India case guidelines. There is a mains practice question also. What are the key issues plaguing the criminal justice system in India? Discuss the recommendations made by various committees to address these challenges, focusing upon the police reforms. Please try to write it. Now, the next article is related to India-UK relations. The context behind it is that the External Affairs Minister, Mr. Jaishankar, met the Prime Minister of UK to discuss the bilateral ties. So, we will understand the significance of India-UK relations, the challenges that the relations faces, and the suggestions in this regard. This is important in GS2 under the topic Effect of Politics and Policies of Developed and Developing Countries on India's Interests and Indian Diaspora. India-UK relations has a historical background. India was a colony under the British. Even after independence, after 1950, we remained a member of the Commonwealth. But the India-UK relations, they became strenuous. The ties worsened during the Cold War era because the UK criticized the conducting of nuclear tests by India. But after that, there was a phase of improvement. For example, in 2004, the level of the India-UK relations was upgraded to that of a strategic partnership. Now, both countries are important for each other. UK is significant for us geopolitically because it supports India's bid to get the permanent membership of the United Nations Security Council. We have cooperation from the UK across various forums, for example, G20, in the Indo-Pacific region, for the rebuilding efforts in Afghanistan. We have put in place a disarmament and non-proliferation dialogue with UK. There is a India-UK joint working group also on counter-terrorism. Geostrategically looking also, India is presenting a good opportunity to Britain to look beyond China, and therefore we can serve well to UK in the China plus one strategy. Economically, both countries are important for each other, as the Joint Economic and Trade Committee was also formed in 2005. The bilateral trade between both the countries is more than $20 billion now. We are also serving as a source of foreign direct investment in UK. India is sending FDI in UK. We have invested in 120 projects in UK. We have generated 5,000 jobs in UK. And we are the 12th largest trading partner for UK. In terms of defense also, it is significant as there is a defense and international security partnership since 2015. And the UK companies, they supply the parts of aircrafts in India. For example, the parts of Jaguar, Mirage aircrafts, some of them are manufactured and supplied from UK. There is a cooperation in the nuclear sector as well. In 2010, the Civil Nuclear Cooperation Declaration was given. In 2015, an agreement was signed, the Nuclear Collaboration Agreement. Likewise, in the education field, there is cooperation. The UK-India Education and Research Initiative has a mobility program through which the study in India is promoted. Likewise, there are about 50,000 Indian students who are studying in the UK. In the health sector also, there is cooperation. For example, the development of COVID-19 vaccines was also done simultaneously and with cooperation between AstraZeneca and the Serum Institute of India. In the climate sector, again, UK is significant for us because there is a India-UK Green Growth Equity Fund which has been put in place. UK also supports the initiative One Sun, One World, One Grid to promote solar energy and the renewable energy. In terms of culture, there is cooperation as the Nehru Center has been established in London, and we have about 1.5 million Indian diaspora in UK. Now, coming to the free trade agreement, which is proposed to be signed between India and UK, it will be beneficial for both the countries. The free trade agreement between India and UK will benefit India because it will give market access to India. The tariffs will be reduced on the products which we export to UK, the tariffs on textile, pharma products, agricultural products. And since it will increase the industrialization in India, it will create more employment in these sectors, textile, pharma and agriculture. The mobility will be better as it will include the agreements upon the IT, the mobility of service professionals. The foreign direct investment into India will increase in certain sectors, for example, technology, infrastructure, the renewable energy, because India presents an investment opportunity to UK in sectors like infrastructure especially. Plus, strategically, it will be important for us because the free trade agreement between India and UK, it can serve as a template for us for the signing of FTA with the European Union also. This FTA will be beneficial for UK as well, because through that it will also get market access, the Indian market for the Scotch whisky, the financial services upon which the tariffs are imposed currently by India. Likewise, it will serve as a good trade initiative from the side of UK post its exit from the European Union, and India is an investment golden opportunity for UK. The strategic partnership across India and UK that will be utilized further across the global forums also. But there are certain challenges that the signing of this free trade agreement faces. For example, India demands that the number of work visas which are issued to the Indian professionals, especially the IT professionals, the service professionals, should be more from the side of UK. Likewise, the social security measures should be improved. The worker benefits in the UK that the workers from Indian origin get should be better. The rules of origin is another issue of dispute, as the local sourcing requirements have been put in place in UK if tariff benefits are sought. Likewise, India demands that the carbon border tax that the UK imposes, India should be exempted from that. Now, there are a few challenges that the India-UK relations face in general. For example, there is a delay in the signing of the free trade agreement. The stand on the Ukraine war has been different for India and UK. UK has criticized the Russian invasion into Ukraine from the starting part itself, whereas India views Russia as an important partner. The ties with Pakistan has been a bone of contention. The UK sells arms to both India and Pakistan. Likewise, the ties with China of the UK has also caused concerns in India. India does not participate in the Belt and Road Initiative, whereas UK has significant engagement in the Belt and Road Initiative. Likewise, there are allegations that UK harbors the Khalistanis. These are concerns for India, the Khalistanis and the Sikh separatism if it is supported by UK. The migration and mobility agreement has not been signed yet. It will smoothen the movement of the IT professionals especially. There is an anti-colonial resentment also which still persists, because there are a few gifts that UK gave to us. For example, the Kashmir issue. And these are pain points for India. There is a progress in the defense ties, but that progress has been slow. For example, India prefers the government-to-government agreements, but UK has been slow in the adoption of government-to-government agreements. Likewise, although India and UK have an extradition treaty, but the extraditions usually are delayed or do not happen. For example, the extradition of Vijay, Nirav Modi, etc. Now, what are the suggestions to improve the India-UK relations? One, we can finalize the free trade agreement as soon as possible. It will increase investment in India. It will create jobs in India. The agreement on migration and mobility can be signed. We can revive the multilateralism together. Both India and UK can cooperate in the revival of the WTO and the UNFCCC in the climate change also. We can streamline the extradition process. We can engage more with the UK in the Indian Ocean region. And we can ensure a free and open Indo-Pacific. We can ensure a rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific. And we can explore cooperation in technology, for example, artificial intelligence and climate change further. Now, there is a mains practice question also. Discuss the significance of India-UK bilateral ties in the contemporary global context. Analyze the potential benefits and challenges of a free trade agreement between the two countries. Please try to write it. Now, the next article is related to space debris. This is important in GS3 under the topic Science and Technology, Developments and their Applications and Effects in Everyday Life. Before coming to the article, let's first understand what is space debris. Space debris includes any dead satellites, smaller items, or even paint flecks that have fallen off a rocket. The majority of the space debris is in the low Earth orbit, about 2000 kilometers from the surface of the Earth. The sources of debris can include the satellite launches. We are launching too many satellites, for example, the Starlink satellites for internet. The operations also include the debris sources. The deterioration of the satellites which have been abandoned, which have been decommissioned, they often get fragmented also. Sometimes they get exploded and sometimes they collide with the other satellites. If they have been decommissioned, they are no more under the human control. Sometimes these collisions are accidental, sometimes they are deliberate. Deliberate, for example, the anti-satellite tests conducted by China, USA, even India also. And this leads to the formation of a debris population. As per the European Space Agency's Space Environment Report 2022, there are more than 30,000 pieces of debris which are recorded and which are being tracked. These are the larger debris. There are smaller pieces also. So what are the causes? Again, the increasing number of launches, the decommissioned satellites, the anti-satellite tests and the fragmentation. But there are certain challenges and threats due to this space debris. One, the satellites are endangered. The satellites, they may collide with the space debris and they will be damaged. One of the first cases of endangering of satellite was the Russian Cosmos 1275. It may lead to a Kessler syndrome. That is, the debris will collide with each other. It will trigger a chain reaction and cause further collisions. Likewise, it will limit the future space activities. Because there will be too much debris already in the space, how can we launch more satellites then? And the International Space Station, it has to course correct often because it is quite large and orbiting the Earth. And to avoid the collision of the International Space Station with the debris, it has course corrected more than 30 times in the past 3 decades. And it causes space pollution as well. Sometimes it leads to geopolitical tensions as the space debris of the space launches of one country may fall on another country. Now coming to the article, a 500 kg metal object has crashed in Kenya. There are allegations that this is a separation ring from a space-bound rocket which was launched by the Kenyan Space Agency itself. So there is a growing problem of the space debris due to the increasing space activity due to launching of more rockets, satellites and spacecraft. The rising debris because of more space objects being placed in the space. And similar debris crashes have happened in the US and Australia also. There has been a rapid growth due to projects like the SpaceX Starlink, Amazon Kuiper and OneWeb, which are supposed to add more than 1 lakh satellites by 2030. The debris accumulation happens due to the older satellites also. The older satellites, they did not have any deorbiting plans. They are still circulating around the Earth. They are orbiting the Earth. And sometimes the re-entries are also survived by the larger objects. The larger objects like rocket boosters and fuel tanks, they survive the re-entry into the Earth atmosphere and crash on the Earth's surface. For example, the SpaceX Dragon fragment crashed in Australia. Now, there are certain legal and accountability related challenges when it comes to the tackling of space debris. For example, there is no universal definition of the term space debris. It is not universally accepted. Likewise, the Article 6 of the Outer Space Treaty provides that it shall be the responsibility of the state which is launching that space object for all the national space activities to tackle the space debris, even if it has been launched by a private entity in that country or a government-owned entity. The 1972 Liability Convention attaches the liability to the space objects, but the enforcement of that liability remains disputable because the debris is no longer under a state's jurisdiction. There should be absolute liability. The launching states, they should be liable for any damage which is caused by the debris even if they were not negligent in the launch. Therefore, there should be absolute liability, and there are enforcement gaps. For example, the disputes regarding the damage caused and the reparation for the same due to the space debris are settled by the diplomatic negotiations or through prolonged and inadequate settlements. For example, a Soviet satellite carrying a nuclear warhead, it crashed in Canada, the Cosmos 954 incident in Canada, but inadequate reparations were paid by Russia. Likewise, there are governance gaps also. For example, the re-entries of the space objects, they are uncontrolled. There are no binding rules upon the re-entries, and there is no penalty unless it causes some damage. For example, the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket has a debris in Poland. The Federal Aviation Administration in USA claimed that its oversight ended when the control was lost. Likewise, China's Long March 5B rocket, its core stage, has uncontrolled re-entry into Earth multiple times, the latest one being recently only since 2020. There is a lack of disposal mechanisms also. The older rockets, the older satellites, they do not have a deorbiting plan. They keep on circulating, orbiting around the Earth. So there is an urgent need for regulatory reforms to tackle the space debris, because a mandatory oversight is needed for the re-entries, and there should be binding regulations. The UN Committee on the Peaceful Use of Outer Space can push for the adoption of global rules regarding the regulation of re-entries. The disposal rules should also be put in place. The mandatorily controlled re-entries should be made, or there should be a movement to the graveyard orbits, which can be enforced through sanctions, or there can be launch bans upon those entities which do not ensure this. The suggestions include the adoption of tracking systems. We can also adopt the systems like US Space Fence, which is there for the re-entry predictions. We can adopt sustainable practices, for example, the incentivization of debris neutral technologies and reusable rockets. We can adopt the domestic policies. For example, the government should mandate the debris mitigation strategies for giving the launch licenses to the entities which are involved in the space launches. The liability convention should be modernized. We can put in place an independent international tribunal. This tribunal should have binding and enforceable powers. The global cooperation should be sought to put in place enforceable rules and accountability mechanisms. Now the era of voluntary guidelines is over, as there is too much space debris in the space already, and there should be mandatory and enforceable guidelines. Now the next article is related to the brief history of the Ukraine war. This is important in GS2 under the topic Effect of Policies and Politics of Developed and Developing Countries on India's Interests and Indian Diaspora. Now, what are the recent developments in the Ukraine conflict? Recently, the policy of the US has shifted. There was a public spat also between President Trump and Zelensky in the Oval Office itself, after which the USA paused the military aid to Zelensky, to Ukraine. And what was the response of Zelensky? He expressed regret, and he expressed the readiness for a partial truce and offered to work for peace along with President Trump. Now, let's also look at the origins of this Russia-Ukraine war. It was initiated by President Putin. The Russian invasion was done by President Putin thinking that there will be a quick victory. It happened in February 2022, 3 years back. But the Western response was that first they evacuated, the US and the allies, they evacuated the embassies, but simultaneously they armed Ukraine. They wanted Ukraine to resist the Russian invasion. They wanted to weaken Moscow. Biden's strategy was to impose heavy sanctions upon Moscow and simultaneously heavily arm Ukraine to weaken the power of Moscow. Initially, it was successful. By late 2022, the Russian forces retreated from Kharkiv and Kherson provinces. But later on, there was an escalation from the side of Russia itself. Putin annexed 4 Ukrainian oblasts, and he has signaled the readiness for a prolonged war also. Now, what is the current state of war? Currently, there are Russian gains. In 2023-24, Russia captured important territories of Soledar, Bakhmut, Avdiivka and Vuhledar. Please remember these terms for prelims. And Ukraine has been struggling. In 2023, it launched a counteroffensive, but it failed and it has been on the defensive since. There was some advance from the Ukrainian side in August 2024 when Ukraine captured about 1,000 kilometers in Russia's Kursk region. But there have been drone and missile attacks. The Ukraine has also targeted deep Russian territories, Black Sea also, but it has encountered battlefield losses. Now, why has the US policy changed? What has been the rationale, probable reason behind Trump's policy shift? One, there was a campaign promise of Trump. He vowed to end the war quickly, the war between Russia and Ukraine. And he has denied the NATO membership to Ukraine. He has held direct talks with Russia. President Trump talked to Putin directly. And he has signaled a reset in the US-Russia relations. This has been a strategic realignment, as US views China as the primary threat, and he wants to avoid a Sino-Russian alliance. And President Trump views Ukraine's role as a little insignificant, as Trump views Ukraine to be unable to win the war, and therefore he urges Kyiv to accept a US-Russia deal. Now, what has been Europe's dilemma in this situation? Historically, European Union hesitated from giving the NATO membership to Ukraine. Germany and France were reluctant from granting NATO membership to Ukraine in 2008. But later on, the European Union negotiated the peace settlements and the Minsk Accords were signed. The peace was negotiated in 2014. But the USA continued military support to Ukraine, and the Minsk Accords therefore failed. What it has led to is it has had economic costs for the European Union. The war has increased the cost of living in the European Union because the cheap Russian gas, the cheap Russian energy that it used to get because of the Nord Stream pipeline is disrupted. It has led to even deindustrialization in some parts of the European Union. For example, Germany going through recession. And simultaneously, US has excluded the European Union from the talks also. USA is directly talking with Russia. When we look at the NATO's future, it again remains in limbo because of the reorientation of the foreign policy of USA under President Trump. What has been Ukraine's situation in this? Ukraine has faced only losses. It has faced territorial losses. Over 20% of the Ukraine's territory is under the control of Russia. It has faced losses in terms of human lives, the death of soldiers, displacement of millions of people, and the economy of Ukraine is in shambles. It is going through an energy crisis also because Russia's bombing has targeted the Ukraine's energy infrastructure. There is the military dependence of the Ukraine upon the external factors. For example, the external supplies for the military is more than half of its weapons. There is a manpower shortage also in Ukraine for fighting the war. There are limited options that it has. It cannot retake the lost territories. At the same time, now the NATO membership is also off the table. Likewise, the USA is not even offering any security guarantees also in exchange for President Zelensky agreeing to the US-Russia deal. Now, this has been a classic case of a proxy war dynamics because the great powers, they fight through proxies when the interests clash, and when their interests are similar, then they realign their foreign policy, which President Trump has done. Therefore, Ukraine has merely been a pawn in this conflict between USA and Russia. Now, the next article is related to the Egyptian alternative to Trump's Gaza Riviera plan. This is important in GS2 under the topic Effect of Policies and Politics of Developed and Developing Countries on India's Interests and Indian Diaspora. An emergency summit of the Arab League was held and the Cairo Declaration was adopted. What does it say? It proposes an Egyptian plan, a $53 billion Egyptian plan for the reconstruction of Gaza as a comprehensive Arab strategy. This plan has been adopted after Israel cut off the humanitarian aid to Gaza after the Israel-Hamas deal. And this is contingent upon the full implementation of the ceasefire agreement, especially by Israel. It provides for the interim governance mechanism that for the interim period, Gaza Administration Committee should be established. It will be of the qualified Gazans for a transitional period. It prescribes a financial commitment also. It pledges that there should be the formation of a trust fund. This trust fund should be used for recovery and reconstruction, and it should be supported by the World Bank and the United Nations studies. The UN peacekeeping should also be there. The forces of the UN peacekeeping should remain in Gaza and West Bank. There should be the adoption of the two-state. The two-state solution is reaffirmed. The support has been reaffirmed based upon the borders of 1967 by the Arab League with East Jerusalem as the capital of Palestine. The proposal also bats for the unity under the Palestinian Liberation Organization. It will be uniting all the factions excluding the Hamas after the reforms. Now, what are the key changes in the Cairo Declaration? One, there is no mention of Hamas now. It does not explicitly call for the removal of Hamas, so therefore it has left the room for its interim role. And it calls for an interim administration also. It will be the preparatory administration until the Palestinian Authority can unify the governance and all the factions can unify under the Palestinian Liberation Organization. It bats for the adoption of elections, the elections for the legislature and the presidential elections. This has been welcomed by Hamas because in the previous elections, Hamas had commanded a majority. It has rejected the ethnic cleansing. It has said no to Trump's proposal to displace Gazans to Egypt and Jordan, as the Riviera plan of Trump to reconstruct Gaza involved the displacement of Gazans to Egypt and Jordan. Also, the Israeli withdrawal has been sought. There should be a complete withdrawal of Israel from Gaza, including Philadelphia corridor as well. So what has been the reaction to that? The Hamas's response has been positive, as the elections have been suggested in the Arab League proposal and Hamas won the previous elections. The Israel and USA have criticized it because Hamas's role is still there and it sees that the Arab League has been lenient towards Hamas. The Netanyahu's stance has been to reject the governance from the Palestinian Authority in Gaza. He insists that Hamas should be eliminated completely. The settlements in the West Bank have expanded simultaneously. The Israeli settlers in West Bank are about more than 7 lakh people in 2023. So it may undermine the two-state solution which is proposed. So what is the future of Palestine? The future will depend upon peace. The sequence of peace will be first the cessation of Israeli military actions, then the reconstruction and interim governance which is accepted by all the parties, and then the settlement of the Palestinian statehood question also. But there are implementation challenges because of the Israeli cooperation and Netanyahu's strong stance, as he wants complete elimination of Hamas. Now, the next article is related to the domicile quota in the postgraduate medical admissions. This is important in GS2 under the topic governance. The Supreme Court in a recent case in Dr. Tanvi Bahl versus Shrey Goyal in 2025 itself has said that the domicile-based reservations in the postgraduate medical admissions in state medical colleges is not allowed. It violates Article 14, the right to equality in the Indian Constitution. The author has criticized the Supreme Court judgment. There is a role of the domicile quotas in the state health planning, as the domicile quotas will help the state in aligning the investment in medical education with the healthcare personnel retention. If there are quotas for the domestic people to get admissions in the medical colleges, there will be a predictable supply of doctors who are familiar with the local healthcare needs. This will ensure the replenishment of the specialist workforce because the postgraduate medical courses, they offer and create the specialist doctors, unlike the undergraduate MBBS programs. If it is not adopted, it may disrupt the specialist pipeline and the states may have to rely on the external recruitment, which may create inefficiencies, and there will be further resignations from the specialist doctors in the state healthcare system. So what will be its impact on the state investment and competitive federalism? It may lead to the reduction of the incentives. The states may deprioritize the funding for medical colleges if they are not able to retain the medical graduates who are passing out from their medical colleges. It may create further regional disparities because of the declining infrastructure which may happen due to the reduction of the domicile quotas. Likewise, the central institutions, they are already having the selection autonomy. The AIMS, PGIMER, JIPMER, they have the selection autonomy in the admissions that they give in the PG courses. The constitutional and public health considerations are also significant. Under Article 21, the right to life and liberty, there is the inherent and implied right of access to adequate health care, and the public health is a state subject. Therefore, the state should have autonomy for aligning the medical education with the local healthcare needs. Also, there is a critique of the absolute meritocracy also. It may lead to structural inequities. For example, in 2023 NEET PG results, the candidates who had negative marks also qualified due to the percentile based cutoffs. So absolute meritocracy may also not be good, and there should be a social context of merit also. We should also consider the regional and socio-economic disparities while giving admissions. Plus, there have been judicial precedents. For example, in Jagdish Saran case in 1982, the court observed that for determining whether the administrative action is good or not, we also need to emphasize upon the societal good. We need to redress the inequalities also, not only focus upon meritocracy. The Economic Survey 2024-25 has also argued that the retaining of doctors in their home states will improve the healthcare access. So there is a need for the reconsideration as per the author of the Supreme Court judgment, as the specialist retentions is needed especially in the post-COVID era because of the rising non-communicable diseases also, and we can integrate the domicile quotas with the public service obligations. For example, Tamil Nadu has a model where the domestic quota is provided, but there are simultaneous service mandates, the public service obligations imposed upon the doctors. It amounts to even judicial overreach as claimed by the author, as it blurs the line between constitutional interpretation of Article 14 and the involvement of judiciary in the detailed policy design. So there is a risk of over-centralization, as it will weaken the federalism, it may exacerbate the regional disparities in healthcare, it may threaten the public health because of the undermining of the state's individual healthcare priorities. The next article is related to the River Dolphin survey. This is important in GS3 under the topic Environment and Conservation. The dolphin population survey was conducted by the Wildlife Institute of India between 2021 to 2023. This is the first ever comprehensive population estimation of the Gangetic and Indus dolphins. Both the Gangetic and Indus dolphins are classified as endangered. The survey gives the population estimates. It estimates that there are about 6,324 Gangetic dolphins in India. The Ganga main channel provides for the home for 3,275 Gangetic dolphins. The Gangetic tributaries account for 2,400 odd Gangetic dolphins. The Brahmaputra accounts for about 600 Gangetic dolphins. The Indus dolphins were counted at only 3 in number in Beas River in Punjab. When we look at the state-wise distribution, the maximum number of Gangetic dolphins were there in Uttar Pradesh at about 2,397, and in Bihar it is about 2,200, and followed by West Bengal at about 800. What was the methodology of the survey? The methodology included adoption of both the acoustic survey and the visual survey. The acoustic survey is used because the dolphins navigate using echolocation. This is the same principle which is used by sonar aboard the submarines, and therefore the mammals make the clicking sounds when they bounce back after hitting the objects. The acoustic survey uses multiple underwater microphones known as the hydrophones to capture these clicks in order to counter the observer's error. Simultaneously, visual surveys were also conducted. These depend upon the vessel available and the water depth and channel width. Different kinds of visual surveys can be adopted. The deep and wide channels, there the double observer method is used, in which 2 teams are positioned on different decks covering different angles around the vessel, and they scan for dolphins surfacing around them as the boat travels. But there are certain challenges in the estimation of the number of Gangetic dolphins. First challenge is the dolphin behavior itself. The dolphin dives in the water for a long period for more than 100 seconds, but it comes to the surface only briefly for about 1.26 seconds. Therefore, it may lead to the errors in the observation, the visual observation. Likewise, the dolphins, they live in the turbid waters, the opaque waters, and it may lead to the difficulty in the visual detection. The dolphin hotspots and cold spots were also defined in the survey. The cold spots are those areas which have sparse or no dolphin presence. For example, in the Ganga, the Narora to Kanpur stretch. In Assam, the Barak River. The hotspots are those areas which have a high dolphin density. For example, in Bihar, the Chosa Manihari stretch. There are certain conservation concerns. For example, the threats include the river water pollution, riverbed mining, low water depth, the damage to habitat, the decline in the number of prey available, and the climate change also. So why is this survey significant? because it provides for the timely data. It ensures that the government is able to plan for the conservation, the targeted conservation strategies can be formulated, and it may serve as the baseline for the future studies. Thank you.